Hello, everyone. This is Marco from HackBuddy, and I'm sitting across the table here with Matic. He is the creator, actually, of GraphQL Shield and SwiftGraphQL. He is a person that knows a lot about GraphQL. He also knows a ton about Swift and TypeScript, and he regularly posts updates on these topics on his Twitter. Matic, welcome.
Hey, thank you for having me.
Yeah, so I did a brief intro about you, but can you please tell us more about yourself? How long have you been programming and where have you learned to code?
Yeah, of course. So I've been programming for about 10 years now. And basically, I started just by first making games and then kind of like transitioning into building websites. And I got more involved just about the time when GraphQL got exciting. And basically, then I quickly started building libraries because I was more or less just spending a lot of time in blogs and like forums, and basically saw what people needed and wanted to like aid them with my knowledge. And from there, I also like learned, met new people, and just experienced open source as it is. Yeah.
Wow. So at what point did you start doing some open source work?
So I started doing open source about 5 or 6 years ago. And that was like my third year of high school. And basically, now that I look back at it, I think I had just enough knowledge to like not be a complete noob about it, and just like not have enough knowledge to be really hired by someone. And then there was kind of like this great gap where I had plenty of time, plenty of interest, and like the only thing that I could do was read code on GitHub and write my code. And then I just kind of decided that I want to project all my time into making these great libraries and meet new people. And that's more or less what I did. Yeah.
Did open source work help you get better at your skills and build a better portfolio, get hired easily?
Yeah, of course. So like I really remember back in the day, like I remember working for like 1 or maybe 2 years, basically for free, just helping people. And a lot of my friends would be like, "But why are you doing that? Like you could easily get paid." And then it turned out that because I was doing a lot of open source and like getting together with the right people, I got much better deals, right? And then like it really paid off to work for free first, because then I got like a lot better interviews. Like I met far more interesting people than I would have otherwise. Like I really expanded my horizon and to kind of really learn a lot more, because you know that I think like especially with TypeScript and like JavaScript community as a whole, a lot of people come with almost no prior knowledge. They like ask you basic stuff, and that basic stuff also sometimes becomes more complex stuff, and then you learn how like to explain complex ideas in simpler terms. And they also kind of challenge you, because as the library grows, features become more and more complex, and you have to like consider more and more stuff. So definitely big help. Yes.
Oh, amazing. Yeah. I was just checking out your GitHub page, and I've seen that you have two really interesting libraries that I would love to talk about today. One being GraphQL Shield, and the other one being SwiftGraphQL. Can you explain to me what those are, what they do, and all that stuff?
Yeah, of course. So GraphQL Shield is the more mature one of the libraries, or maybe mature is not the right word, more like the oldest one. It was one of the first libraries I created. And basically the idea back then was that many people were struggling with writing permissions for their GraphQL schemas. And I kind of saw this sleek way of making permissions more accessible. So not accessible, like easier to write, and nobody else was doing it in the community. I kind of thought that everyone was doing it in a bit strange way. And then I just like jumped in and made the library. And basically, GraphQL Shield helps you write permissions for your schema in a really simple way, and lets you also create a set of rules that you can reuse and then combine using these logical operators. And then SwiftGraphQL only came about, I think it was 1 or maybe 2 years ago during COVID. And basically, we had this problem that we wanted end-to-end type safety for our Swift clients. And we had really complex queries. And building these complex queries in pure GraphQL was kind of complex. So we really wanted to do it in code. And that's how the whole library evolved. Yes.
So basically, both of these libraries are supposed to help you get better, or actually make GraphQL more appealing and more accessible and easily accessible for web development.
Something like that, yes. So like I would say that GraphQL Shield is a bit more niche because it really aids more to permissions, while SwiftGraphQL, and especially like with the new version that we just released, is like a really versatile Swift client that takes all the best things that people have learned in the TypeScript community and just like brings it to the Swift community, because there are lots and lots of clients for GraphQL written in TypeScript, like I don't know, 3, 4, 5, and all of them are super interesting. While in the Swift ecosystem, it's more like just 1 or maybe 2 big players, and just writing that seemed like a right thing to do.
Right. Good to know. Would you mind giving us a tour of GraphQL Shield and Swift GraphQL, or?
Yeah, of course. So maybe to give you a kind of a background of what the main reason for creating this library was. So there are now 3 clients that you can use to write GraphQL in Swift. One of them is Apollo. It's also one of the biggest one. Right? I think it's the biggest one right now. And basically Apollo GraphQL maintains it. Then you have, I think it's called GraphQL, that lets you write queries kind of like classes. And then you also have a relay port to Swift. I think that one's really interesting. And then you have like SwiftGraphQL. And basically the problem we had was that we, as I said, like we had these really long queries. And the way Apollo IIS handles that is that you write your queries in plain GraphQL, and then they run the generator and generate like the configuration files. No, not configuration files, more like well, they just generate code that lets you fetch data from your endpoint, right? And basically what happens is that if you reference the same type from 2 different places, you get 2 different models in your Swift file. So if I give you an example, it's like, let's imagine you have a schema that has something like you have a me field that returns a user, and then like users have ID, let's say ID, name, and friends again, right? So so it's kind of like that. And basically in JavaScript, this problem never arises because, or maybe like in TypeScript, because TypeScript structurally compares objects, right? So if you have a user type, it doesn't matter where in the chain it is. Like if it's kind of like duck typing the whole thing, right? And with Swift, on the other hand, Apollo decided to make a distinction here. So if you write a query that kind of like fetches me first, and then like an ID, I query ID and name, and I also query friends, friend's ID and name, I would get two different structures, right? So in JavaScript, I only get objects, and basically I can use them more or less interchangeably. But with SwiftGraphQL, how do you see, in Swift world, Apollo would generate one user type for my friends and one user type for me. And basically our queries, because they are really large and complex, have like reference the same schema object in different places, right? And we would end up, and like we ended up having, say, 5 different types of user, even though they all represented the same thing. And having the other part of our code base written in Elm, we knew about this Elm GraphQL library that was really, really popular. And basically the idea there was that as you write your model and queries, you kind of like write decoders for the GraphQL response at the same time when you write your queries. And we wanted to replicate that. And basically how SwiftGraphQL works is that you write your queries directly in the code, right? So if I have a schema, I can just like say, well, I want to select something from the query object, and it's gonna maybe return a user, and then I can select the viewer field and select that, like fetch that. And then if I want to populate my user model, so that's kind of like, if I want to populate my user model that has all of these properties, well, I just select fields from the user object, and you get also this neat type of completions. So let's see. So what you get here is the promise that if your project builds right with these queries, your queries are right. So like you don't have to do any decoding or anything. You can be confident without testing the schema and like the types and everything, that if your Swift project builds, then your queries are definitely correct. Like you made no mistake. And that holds true even when you make changes to your schema. The Swift's type system is going to validate that it's actually correct. So that's kind of where we started. And the first version only introduced the selection process, right? It was more of a query builder library. And then like as our needs evolved, we kind of noticed that we also need these caching mechanisms and everything. And I started looking at how people do that in TypeScript world and JavaScript, where people have already explored the possibilities. And we decided that we want to heavily base our new client on Oracle. And basically, Oracle handles these things by having this single pipeline chain where at the top you get your requests. So this is like the developer land, so your code sends a request, and then the client sends that request through the chain, and you get a response back. And this lets us really cleverly abstract concepts of caching and like revalidation. And that's basically where I think the new version of GraphQL, of SwiftGraphQL shines, because you can really pick out just the things that you need, and all of them are different like sub-libraries. So if I show you here, it's kind of like you have basic packages that just let you describe your GraphQL requests. You can extract GraphQL introspection. You can get like your schema introspection information in Swift using GraphQL AST. You can talk to WebSockets because we have a full implementation for WebSockets. And I think this is actually the only really spec compliant GraphQL WebSocket library right now in Swift. So that's really exciting. And then if you feel like adventurous, you can also use the client. And if you're like, if you really like everything else, then you can also use the query builder, right? And we also have basic caching support and like incremental updates and all of that, and basically are looking into making the normalization caching and all sorts of things. Like it's really, I think it's a really awesome library.
Oh yeah, yeah, it truly is. From what I can understand is it's gonna make you forget about the GraphQL layer altogether. You only need to worry about Swift and eventually running an update, recompile every time when you change something in the schema. And
Exactly.
yeah, it makes for a really intuitive and efficient GraphQL querying system from what I can see. Nice.
Yeah, and maybe like if I also show you, so you basically, that's the query builder part, and that's the part that I'm really excited about.
Mm-hmm.
And then like to make a request, you basically would go into, you basically create a client and just call the client, just call these basic functions on the client. So maybe let me first show you how you make the calls. So you make the calls with either mutate, query, or subscribe, and then you attach your selection. And the interesting part here is that even here, you can't mess up and select a query instead of a mutation, right? So like it really, like here, your type system is your friend, if I say so, because like if I write here query instead of mutation, and like the system knows that what I've written here is actually a mutation, right? So it shouldn't be a query, and it will remind me that I did that wrong. And the other part that I wanted to show here is the how you can construct a client, and this has to do with how exchanges work. And basically, exchanges are kind of just these functions that handle your request. And you can really see how easy it is to extend the basic HTTP functionality with something like authentication, where you add header token to your requests, and then also how you can authenticate using WebSockets, how you can create a cache engine, and basically everything else. So yeah.
Nice. Nice. Yeah, I really like it. Yeah, so that was a tour of the Swift GraphQL ecosystem and the actual operation, how it would look like for the developer on the developer side of Swift GraphQL. I know that you have a ton of experience working with GraphQL. Would you mind giving us some tips and piece of advice from your hands-on experience working with GraphQL on what can people emphasize and use more so they can get better when working with GraphQL in general?
Also, like, I really think what we are doing at the guild, so like I'm contributing to the guild, but like everything that's happening with everyone at the guild, I think is really exciting. So stuff like the envelope and the new GraphQL yoga, I think are really moving the whole ecosystem in the right direction. And basically, that's the theme that I use most frequently nowadays. So I write all my servers there, and then also just use the type safety that I'm so fond of to make the clients. And yeah, I think that's more or less everything that I have right now. Like I can talk a lot. Sorry, yeah, go ahead.
You just mentioned GraphQL servers. Can you explain us a bit more about GraphQL servers and what tools do you use to build those?
Yeah, so like I really like building servers in TypeScript because I think just the stack there is really nice. And I usually simply go with GraphQL Yoga nowadays and customize it based on the needs of that particular project. So I think like isn't npm more like just a package? I mean, at the end of the day, yoga and TypeScript are just packages, right? So you still use npm to do it.
Gotcha.
Yeah, sorry.
Yeah, no worries. So now I would love to ask you, based on your open source work, are you looking to add more features to either GraphQL Shield or SwiftGraphQL that can make them a better full-on product at the moment, not just an open source library?
Yeah, definitely. So like I kind of transitioned in this last year, or maybe last half a year, to working to more focus on building Swift GraphQL, because I started building more and more iOS apps, and I think it can become a much more sophisticated library. And basically, the way I see it is that with the second version of Swift GraphQL, we got this really impressive foundation, right? We can already see what people have built in other ecosystems, because the library was inspired by them. And that gets me really excited about what's to come, because I think now that we have the foundation set up, the exciting part is about to come, and it's going to be super easy to get there. So that's like the one thing that I'm really looking forward is implementing normalized caching. So that's like, maybe this sounds a bit like a buzzword, but basically the idea is that when only part of your cached query updates, it updates everywhere. So kind of like so it's kind of just a very smart caching mechanism. And I think it's also one of the things that people rely on in production apps. So once we have that, I think it's going to be like the top library to use. So yeah, that's that. And then when it comes to just making a product out of a library, I would say it's more of like at the guild. I think we have this idea that you do open source for the right things, and that inherently you shouldn't do open source to earn money, but instead like because you want to do it. So it like that's where I think it kind of starts and ends, because I think that if you like, it's possible to have a library that's part open source, like to make a product that's part open source, and I think it's really common these days in the community to do that, and I think that's right. But just doing it the way we do it, I think it's better if you do it because you really like really want to solve something, and I wouldn't really aim at making the library monetizable. Yeah,
Completely agree. I completely agree. So you mentioned iOS development. Do you use SwiftUI in particular, or are you exploring the other tools and mechanisms for building iOS apps?
Yeah, so I use SwiftUI because that's also like when I more heavily started working with iOS, because coming from React and Elm, I really got used to like composing these to declaratively building my UIs, and basically it just felt so cumbersome to work on apps in like an imperative way, the way it was before. And then with SwiftUI, I started looking into Swift more, and then also became like, that's also why we started building the Swift versions of our apps. Yeah,
I was really surprised when they first released SwiftUI, and I kind of knew that there was a bigger picture behind it. Apple would not just change the language of their apps for no reason.
Yeah. Yeah, I remember. I also remember that watching that keynote, and at the time I wasn't that impressed with the product, but just watching the WWDC that year, I was like, whoa, this is even cooler than everything, all the new tech that they made. So
What are the any other project that you want to mention that you're working on that I haven't mentioned? They don't necessarily have to be GraphQL related or source at all. So yeah, it's up to you.
yeah, so like the funny part is that I spent the last 2 months really decluttering everything. So like I kind of stopped working on all my side projects to focus on studies. So I think the real main project that I mean it's really SwiftGraphQL. That's why I also kind of really wanted to give to talk more about that. So yeah, right now I think
Yeah.
I focus mostly on like studies and just SwiftGraphQL and making it the best library for IIS there is.
At the About You section at the beginning of this interview, you mentioned that
Yeah.
you got into development because of game development. So are there any games that you worked on? Anything that's out there?
In December, so it was like just the end of December, and Twitter just got flooded with Wordle like boxes. So everyone was posting their Wordle scores, and I kind of knew that everyone was gonna work on the English versions. But then I called my friend and was like, I think this game is gonna be a really, really big hit. I think we should make like not really a clone, but like I think we should make a really decent version of it for people in Slovenia. And basically, we sat down and created this, I think, really, really awesome Wordle client. Or it's not like actually a client, it's like hard to describe because I wouldn't say it's a clone because we really spent like a lot of time also working the leaderboard, and it's not like it really really is more than just like a copy paste version. But yeah, and the idea there is that it's not just the English version, but it's more like a localized version for every country. And you can play with friends and like create your own challenges. And yeah, so that's that's the latest game I was working on.
So yeah, Wordle is pretty cool project, and building a Wordle-like app, if it's not a clone, just it's just amazing. So it's in Slovenian, right?
So it's available on iOS and Android, and we kind of like it supports, I think it's now 7 languages. So it's Slovenian, of course, but then there's also the Danish version, the Norwegian version, the German version, and Italian and Hungarian. Yes.
Nice. So yeah, you're covering a huge portion of Europe with your Wordle version.
Yes. Yes.
Nice.
Yes.
Nice.
Yes.
That's really cool. That's really cool. Yeah. So I would like to ask you, what keeps you excited about tech, about coding, like frameworks, backend, front-end technology, anything out there that keeps you excited?
Yeah. Yeah. So like I think one of the more exciting thing there, I think I have like 3 picks. So one is definitely everything going on in Swift. So like I think Swift UI is finally becoming this really stable framework that you can use to build the app from start to finish. Because like, I don't know, 2 years ago, it was kind of like, yeah, you can try it out, like feel adventurous, maybe mess up the whole thing. But now it's really becoming mainstream, I think. So that makes me really excited. And then next to that, I would say it's really the advancements in TypeScript, because I remember maybe like 4 years ago, TypeScript was really like this maybe more or less cliche language that like with the whole stigma of JavaScript, but now everything with the type system that they're building and the potential of this, like I think TypeScript's type system is so advanced now that like it's really exciting to see everything people are building, and also like in GraphQL, that's like just validating the queries as strings because of the type inference. That gets me really excited. Yeah.
What about hardware? And the other thing, like handheld devices need to step up in terms of software development for hardware, so they can make better use of frameworks and tools like GraphQL.
So I think like I kind of notice more and more now that we're working on more games that I think in web development, we have like, there is this nagging feeling that you have to be really efficient with everything, because like, I think that stems from kind of like the network throughput. So like you have to make your site small, and like web browsers are not really the most efficient piece of technology, or like at least they weren't. And then I kind of you go into games and you see that like the hardware is so much more capable than drawing dividers on the screen and like, I don't know, running GraphQL fetch requests. So yeah, yes, like I would say it's more about like figuring out that we can do a lot more on the web than just like display dividers. And yeah.
So before we wrap up this interview, I would love to kind of get an answer from you. What's on the roadmap for SwiftGraphQL right now? And also, what is on the roadmap for the Wordle-like game that you're developing, adding more languages?
So yes, of course. Well, for SwiftGraphQL, I think I'll start promoting. Like, firstly, I think it's really important that library has a great community around it. So now that we have the foundation set up, I'll spend most of my time just making people excited about what we're building. And once we have the community, we'll focus heavily on caching and like making it more versatile, because there are a lot of people who come, for example, from, so say they worked with Apollo, but they want to try something new, right? And so they want to try something new, and basically we want to give everyone an option to do their thing with SwiftGraphQL and not lock them in the system. So it's kind of like, I think the library is opinionated on the right places, and make it, like right now the main goal is to make it really versatile and get people excited. Yeah. And for the Wordle, so we haven't really settled on the name, so we have these localized names. So I'll call it Wordle. Right now we are extending the game, and we're also testing something like a live multiplayer version, and that's kind of exciting because you have a different set of problems. So it's kind of like we are looking into ELO rating system, and then like queues, and just like adjusting the game so it feels right to play it with someone else. And that's, I think, really, really exciting.
Yeah, amazing. Yeah, this kind of gets me excited about scheduling a time a year from now, and just hearing you give me an update on where are you right now with Swift, and where are you right now with the Wordle. Have you even decided on a name? That will be an interesting conversation to have a year later.
Yeah, I would love to do that.
Yeah, me too. So yeah, thank you for your time, and thanks everybody for listening. I hope you all had a great time and really found this conversation valuable.
Thanks. Thank you for having me.